Hello and welcome to the FMCC World FM Day Virtual Conference. This session is Promoting Your Role and Your Department, presented by Michel Theriault. Next slide, please. Everyone has been muted for audio quality, and the webinar is being recorded. If you do have any questions during the presentation, feel free and type them into the question box, and we'll go over them during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. And I do want to let everyone know, next slide, that the FMCC provides many services to the FM community, such as Ask the Expert, Find a Consultant, Locate a Speaker, and online educational resources. You may find more information at their website, fmcc.ifma.org. And as always, we do want to thank our sponsors. And I do want to take a special time out and just say Happy World FM Day. And we just want to thank all of you in the FM profession for all that you do. And this is your day. And I want to thank Michelle for helping make you put the world in the World FM Day in our presentations. And speaking of the virtual conference, there's 18 sessions going for 31 hours. And also, if there's any sessions that you wanted to view that you weren't able to view during the time, they will be archived on the FMCC website. Again, that's fmcc.ifma.org. And this map you're looking at just shows you where all the presenters are throughout the day, those starting from last night. And these pictures are lovely and handsome presenters that without them, this would not have been made possible. And the bottom are the moderators. So I do want to thank all the speakers and the effort they put into doing this. That's me, Joshua Amos, Component Liaison here at IFMA. And here we are to Michel Theriault. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him. There you go, Michel.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to do webinar number 13 on World FM Day. Really quick about myself, I've been hanging around the FM industry for 26 or so years, last 10 years as a consultant and trainer. I've managed large portfolios in-house and as part of an outsourced contractor, so I've got and also spent about a year and a half in a janitorial company, so I've got a rounded view of all the various elements of facility management, the vertical integration part. I've actually been a member of IFMA since 1992. That's been quite a while. They've got a lot of my membership money, although I do firmly believe I get a lot out of that association membership as well. So the book you see on the right is my award-winning facility management book. I won the Distinguished Author Award from IFMA in 2011. I do a lot of speaking at conferences. This webinar is one of the kinds of things that I do. I also teach internationally. Starting in August, I'll be going to Bangkok, Kuwait, Dubai, and Jeddah, and possibly Kazakhstan this fall. Usually I'll add a few others in along the way. So I have a lot of fun dealing with and meeting facility managers from around the world and getting a much broader perspective of the industry. So I want to talk quickly about the learning objectives. Number one, I want to help you discover the evolution of FM and your role. It's been a long time that the requirement to manage facilities or buildings has been, but it's really changing and we need to change along with it. The other thing is you need to understand why strategy, leadership, and business skills are actually a key to succeed in FM, not just technical skills. And I want to teach you some techniques and approaches, that's at the very end. Here's the practical stuff, to position yourself and your department as a leader within your organization. So, I am FM. Most facility managers respond quite well to this picture. It's something they do often. Even those of you who may not have any hair left, muscle memory will bring it back and you'll be grasping your head as you deal with the various things along the days, weeks, months, and years that you do this role for your company. I mentioned I want to talk about the evolution. And it's really important to understand where we came from and where we're going, because part of promoting yourself within your organization, which is what this session is about, is understanding where we are. and realizing why we have to do things differently now. So really we've gone from maintenance to management over time. It's really the demise of the master builder who, 100 years ago could know almost everything about a building. Very, very simple, very simplistic, very few laws, very few rules, building code and all of that, much easier. And we've really moved, if you think about it, from living in huts, caves, and cabins to buildings like the Burj Khalifa, data centers, hospitals, many other facilities that you manage, including large corporate facilities that are so much more complex and more important than ever. And that's because of an increasing technological complexity, legislative complexity, and increasingly a business complexity, whether it's finance, it's the law, or it is other related issues that you have to deal with. So we've really become the jack of all trades. And those of you who know that phrase realize that there is a second part to it, and that is the master of none. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, as a facility manager, especially if you're leading facilities in your organization, you need to know a lot of things, but you don't need to be the expert in all of those things. That's where your staff, your contractors, consultants, and others, even your peers, come in. You really have to change the way we've been doing business. A way I like to look at facility management is through the FM pie. I don't know if you've seen this before. It's really meant to illustrate all the different types of responsibilities that facility managers can have. Not all of us do. In fact, some of these things can be split up into different positions within a real estate department, or they might even be done by a different department. But these are the things that most commonly people do. After I brought out this pie, I received many comments about needing to add things, add something in management leadership, in real estate, etc. And I always point out the last item in every pie says other, because you can only make the print so small. So in fact, this is not even inclusive, and some facility managers have responsibilities that are unique to their own specific role or their specific company. So ultimately, this is the way you should look at yourself. You are holding up your company's success. You're lifting it up and making it work. You're supporting them. And this is the crux of our role. We're often in the background, but without us and without us doing our job successfully, your company may not be able to be as successful. And this is one of the places we need to start when we're thinking about our current role and how to promote yourself. And in fact, if you look at what we do and what our impact is, this is where you should start. On the upper left side, you will see the workstation, and I have $100,000 a year identified here. So your numbers will be different, and I strongly encourage you to do the math. But in this example, a single workstation occupies $10,000 worth of real estate costs. That could be rent, it could be the ownership costs, operations, electricity, all of the elements that go into it. That's not a small number. So when you look at the costs within a company, the two numbers there, number one and number two, let's look at number one first. It's usually people. Unless you're a manufacturer, your payroll is probably your company's number one expense. The number two expense is usually real estate. And again, I encourage you to do the math, but this is the most common percentage is 32%, as you see down at the bottom of the screen, of your total costs for your company would be the real estate cost. Again, it doesn't matter whether you lease or whether you own. This is the kind of average that occurs. And by knowing and understanding this, both yourself and others around you will see how important you actually are in managing your company's business. So on the right is another interesting set of statistics. 15% at the top, 85% at the bottom. So what this represents typically is the total cost of ownership, or a life cycle cost of a facility. 15% is the initial cost. It's what it costs to design and build. 85%, the vast majority of the cost of real estate, is what you manage on a daily basis. Again, this is just an illustration of why and how you are important to your company. So IFMA has a lot of great information, and this is a nugget that came from one of their reports a number of years ago. And basically they say that almost all executives report that facilities management makes a positive impact in their organization's productivity and financial bottom line. 73% say facility management has a positive impact on their competitiveness. Now, you wouldn't know this from the way facilities is usually dealt with and positioned within an organization, and that's one thing you need to change. In fact, look at your impact within your organization. You impact these things. To put it simply, productivity, attraction and retention of staff, health and safety, liability and risk, asset value, and ultimately costs. And even if you look at the first 5, each and every single one of them comes back to a dollar figure. There's a cost to all of these things. So you have a greater impact on your organization than most people recognize. And in fact, we need to recognize that before we can make any change. I also like to look at a real-world definition of facility management. Now, you can come up with your own. This is the one that I typically use. IFMA does have one. BIFM has one. They have their uses, but I think this is simple. And that is, we provide employees with an efficient, comfortable place to work so they can succeed at their job and achieve their organization's goals. Print this up, put it on your office wall, and keep it in mind as you go. So here's a definition that I found a long time ago when I began my career. I have no idea where it came from. It's the ideal facility manager. So I'm just going to read it. An ideal facility manager must have Aristotle's logic, Solomon's wisdom, a priest's discretion, a gambler's poker face, a lawyer's shrewdness, marketing director's charm, a gladiator's guts, a marathon runner's perseverance, and a sprinter's speed, a leatherneck's toughness, and a dancer's agility, lots of good luck, and 30 hours a day. Keep that 30 hours a day in mind. We're going to come back to that. Many of you probably recognize the skills that all of these elements of the facility manager require in a daily basis, and that you actually apply them. So moving on to the knowledge grid, what I have seen in my 26 years of experience and what I've seen in the teaching that I do and the consulting is that successful facility managers have an increasingly higher level of business knowledge than technical knowledge. At the higher levels, there's a shift. And what this shows is as you increase, you go up the pyramid to become a head of FM, whatever that title is, you require a larger amount of business knowledge, experience, and skill, and a less of technical. If you're a technical specialist, because there's many roles in our business, then obviously you need more, but you need some business. And if you want to advance, you need to make a shift. That's one of the key things that I think will make an improvement in our profession. So there are really two sides to the coin. One is the technical knowledge, because facilities is very technical, and the other one is the business skills. And you can't be successful with only one of them, but as you go up the ladder, as I mentioned, the business skills will start to become more important. I wanted to talk very quickly about the 9 reasons your company needs you. Again, this part of the webinar is to remind everybody and give you some information that you can use internal to your organization to remind everybody of how important you are. So these are 9 reasons that you're important. 1, your organization's largest asset, real estate, needs to be managed. Usually it's the second cost of your company. The working environment is critical to core business. Whether you're in a production environment or you've got people in your office in a corporate world, it's the same thing. Facilities accommodations requires planning, and that's what you do for flexibility and cost. Sustainability, it's linked very closely with facilities. Environmental, legislative, and compliance risk of ownership is something you manage. Your team manages value, reduces risk, and minimizes cost for your company. You shift the burden of managing facilities from the core business so they can do what they do best. And your FM background and training protects your organization. And finally, the overall FM issues impacting core business, you deal with the best because you have the skills and abilities. So now I want to look at some of the problems that we encounter and how to solve them. Your mileage may vary. There are some things you might be able to do, and there are some things you actually might not be able to do. But keep these in mind and try to apply them as well as you can. Number 1, you're stuck on a treadmill. From the time you get into the office, and possibly even before you get into the office, you're fielding calls, emails, texts, dealing with issues, problems, and trying to work out how you're going to finish your day at a reasonable time and get everything you need to be done. This is actually one of the key things we have to change. So what do? So I'm going to say simply unplug it. Stop doing things you don't need to do. Prioritize and schedule. And the last one here, make yourself less available. I have dealt with facility managers who felt that they have to be available all the time, and they're the only ones who can deal with issues. To me, they are not managers. If you want to do better, then you should be managing and not just doing. We're going to come back to that. This is not an easy thing to do, but you need to stop and spend some time to work out how you can get off that treadmill. Because the other things that I want you to start doing, you won't be able to do them until you achieve this. Related to that, you are buried in work. You've got paperwork, you've got meetings, you've got issues, things to read and do, all kinds of things that you need to do on a daily basis to deal with your job. So one of the best ways to solve that is to delegate it. So don't think that you have to do everything. When I started my career, I had my head down at my desk and I was doing. I did a lot of things. Accomplished, some very good projects. But when I think back now, I probably didn't have to work as hard as I did. I wasn't working smart. I could have achieved what I achieved in a better way, and I could have done a better job, in fact. That's the hindsight that I have now, especially as a consultant, where I can sit back and don't have the daily calls or the call at 2 in the morning. So how do you do that? Well, you have to know your staff's strengths and interests. Don't ask somebody to do something they can't do or not interested in doing. So find the staff who wants to. Use it as a development opportunity. And so here's another really key thing. If you don't delegate because they can't do it, and I've heard this, my staff can't do that. I can't delegate to them because they'll screw it up. They don't have the knowledge, etc. Train them or replace them. That's the only solution you have. So the other one, can't find time. Again, when I started my career, I thought, wow, when I become a section manager and then a director, I'm going to have a lot more time, more control of my time. And those of you who have risen in the ranks recognize that that doesn't actually happen. You tend to actually lose some control over your time. So you have to take it back. And how do you do that? Well, you block it off. Go to your calendar, decide when, and block it off as unavailable thinking time. I had a meeting with a facility manager who looked after a government organization and went to the office thinking she would be there in her office, and in fact she wasn't. every Tuesday morning, I think it might have been, she goes to the cafeteria, sits in the back, gets her paperwork out, and thinks and plans. No phone calls, no emails. That's the kind of thing you need to do. So don't be available all the time for everything. Don't go to meetings you can't add value to just because you were asked to go. Certainly don't go to meetings if you don't know why you're there. And send your staff as your stand-in, or bring them so that when something comes out of that meeting that needs to be done, it's easier to delegate to them. Again, if you don't have staff that you can do this with, then it's time to change your organization. So the other thing, and I made this mistake as I've already mentioned, is lots of doing. I was always doing something. I was busy doing something. I thought that's what I was being paid to do when I first joined a company in the facilities department. What I actually learned over time is I wasn't doing enough thinking. Because if I was doing the thinking, I would be better strategically, I'd be better logistically, and I would be not on the treadmill and not overwhelmed with paper. And by the way, not overwhelmed with voicemail that filled up almost every day. So you're being paid to think, not just to do, and thinking will make the doing easier. So some of you have probably heard about Stephen Covey. He's written the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And this is a quote that you should look at and think about, that people and their managers are working so hard to be sure things are done right, which I was doing, that they hardly have time to decide if they're doing the right things, which I was not doing. And this is a change that you might be able to make in how you run your operation, not just you, but also your staff. So let's look at a few things that we really should do. So first, you need to find time. I alluded to this in some of the other slides, things like the paperwork and the treadmill. If you can't find time to do the thinking to make sure that you're doing the right things instead of just doing the things right, then you're going to continue down this path. Not have time to think logically, to get things done in a way that is the most successful and that you can use to promote, which is where we're going with this presentation, to promote to your organization that you are extremely valuable to them. The other thing is you really need to stop whining. I don't mean you're necessarily doing this with crying, or you may not actually whine, but we tend to complain a bit about we didn't get the budget, we didn't get the funding, we didn't get the recognition. So instead of wondering why we didn't, we need to change that and say, how are we going to change the way we're being perceived so we get the resources that we want? So instead of being told you have a 5% budget cut next year and whining about it, saying, how am I going to do this? Have your business case, have the justification, be in a position to sell, and convince them that it should not be so, and that it should be plus 2%, for instance. You need to be in a position to do that, and if you don't have time, you can't. And that's actually where most of us fall down. I know I certainly did. Many of the things that I'm talking about here, I talk out of my own personal experience in things that I should have done differently. So the other one is speaking up, which also did not do very much. Neither did anybody in my department. And that is talk about what you're doing, let other people know what's happening, using information to make your case and providing that information to others. Good example is when you have a failure and something goes wrong. The best thing you can do is to advertise that to your senior management. This failed, here's why, and this is why I need more in my budget. This is why I need more resources. You use it to your advantage. So really what you need to do is get better at sales and marketing. I can assure you that's what many of your colleagues within your company are better at doing. And so we need to think a little bit about what does your organization think about when they see facility management, when they see somebody in your organization or when they think about your organization. They usually think about the doer, clipboard, uniform, pen in the pocket, and that's the old way of thinking. What we want them to shift and think about the facility manager as a high-reaching individual, somebody who has a very positive contribution, has the red cape and are leaping over problems, not just plowing through them. And of course, the simple question is, why don't we sell ourselves? Well, number one, you don't often know how valuable you are. You don't realize it. That's one of the reasons I talked about the statistics. Number two, you're comfortable in the background, especially if you've come from certain backgrounds. Maybe you've risen through the ranks as a technician or come from a technical role. You like the logic, you like the problem solving, you like the thinking. Yeah, you not so much want to be thumping your chest and promoting yourself. You're juggling too many things. We talked about that already. Your boss doesn't understand facility management. This is sometimes a problem. We're going to talk about it. And we're told facility managers are successful when nobody knows they're there. Everybody walks in the building, the lighting's on, the heating is comfortable, and they don't think about facility management. We need to change that perspective. In fact, you should be promoting, as I mentioned, the things that you do and the problems and the failures that occur and how you solve them. One of the things you can do is develop a mission and vision statement. This is from a client that I had a number of years ago where we developed this with his staff. So we got the cleaners, the landscaping people, the maintenance technicians, everybody involved in doing this wording, so it was not a top-down situation. So if you're able to take the time to read the vision and mission, you'll see that they're somewhat action-oriented, but they also are very closely aligned with the university's own mission and vision. So we talk about exceptional and innovative learning environments in the vision and how facility management supports that. In the mission, we talk about supportive of academic excellence, and we talk about how that's going to be done by facilities. This is one way of advertising and promoting what you do. So the other one you can do is branding your department. When in one of my previous positions we did this, I don't have a copy of the logo, unfortunately. I wish I did. But we actually branded everything that we put out on the wall, piece of paper, flyer, whatever. Here are some examples. Some of them visually appealing, others maybe not so much. The point here is that when people see something from facilities management, you want a visual representation. You can take your existing corporate logo and add something to it. You can do something completely different. Remember, this is for internal use only. So if your branding department gets upset, you should have that discussion with them. The other thing is developing basically sales material of some sort. Many organizations have handbooks, they have catalogs, as you can see, guide to services. These are examples. If you're interested, you can go online and do some searches for these kinds of things, and you'll get some examples. They're used internally for promotion. The other thing is, if people move, you would have a welcome package for them, and you have many tools that you can use if you have the time and a little bit of money and resources to develop them. But this is what helps promote your department. So here's a very specific example. I worked for Bell Canada. I managed a very large portfolio for them, everything from major administrative buildings to switching centers, which are like data centers. What we did is, when we introduced our new call center, is handed out one of these to everybody in the building. So this is a little swivel that you attach to the end of your phone so that your phone cord doesn't tangle. So it's a practical item that had the phone number for the call center. Now, at the time, we simply called ourselves Realty Services, but this is just an example of simple little things that can be done Nowadays, I see a lot of stickers that are put on phones for who you're going to call if you have a problem. There are a number of different approaches you can take, and this is simply one of them that's very practical and very specific. So there are many other things that you can actually do, and I'll just talk about an example that we did, again, when I was with Bell Canada. The building that you see there in the center, the big tall one, is about 1 million square feet, and then it's got a parking garage right next to it to the lower left. What we did is have open houses once a year. So we had displays in the lobby, and the 15th and 16th floor were mechanical rooms. We cordon off a safe area, and we bring people around so they could actually see how things worked. Did we get a lot of people? No. Do we need a lot of people? No. All you need to do is gradually increase the awareness of people on the floor. And so when you're talking to people, or when they have an issue, they have a better sense for what you actually do. We actually did this a little bit when I was working for an outsourcing company as well, and we had a very positive impact in customer satisfaction results. So the other one is an elevator pitch. If you don't have an elevator pitch, you should have one. This should be a very simple statement that the theory here is you're caught in an elevator with the president or some other senior person, and they say, so what do you do in this company? You have a good quality answer and aren't just simply saying, you clean the toilets and keep the heat on. So here's a very simple example. I break it up into pieces so that it depends on how much time you have to deliver it. So the facility management department provides efficient, productive space for employees to work and process to function. We support the core business that makes this company successful. Sort of a boastful statement, very much related to the definition that I mentioned earlier. So the next one is we manage the second largest company investment. You'd want to make sure that that's the case. You maximize value, minimizing cost, managing risk, and helping the company achieve its overall objectives. We ensure you have the space you need, the facility is productive, and is a positive image to customers and employees. Now you're going to want to adapt some of this to match your specific issues. If you're a retail facility management, you're going to have some different things you want to talk about. A data center, something else you want to get in here. So the last one is we also maintain the building infrastructure and systems that nobody sees to prevent failures that impact the core business, whatever that is. You can substitute what you do, and eliminate physical and legal risks to the asset and our employees. Again, this is just an example, but you should have something, and every one of your employees should have it. And remember, not necessarily word for word, but the points. So you can actually answer the question of what do you do, or what does your department do? So how else do we do this promotion? Well, we use meetings as an opportunity. Every time you have a meeting, one-on-one, big group, use it as an opportunity to promote. Always prepare, know the issues, have a list of talking points related to your role, your department, and how you impact on whatever the meeting is about. Use facts and figures. They're always the best way to demonstrate things. Listen, of course, as much as you talk, and always advocate for FM and your department. Basically, you need to be a salesperson. Every opportunity you have, you need to promote very gently and casually, because you don't want to be pushy like a car salesperson, used car salesperson, but you want to make sure you're always thinking about what should I say, how should I say it, that will make the profession and the department sound and look best. Another quote that I find extremely useful is this one. The only people in the world who can change things are those who can sell ideas. So if you cannot make change without selling, justification for budget, for new systems, for new staff, for accepting a bid that is not the lowest price, all of those things you need to sell to somebody else in order for you to achieve it. And of course, you really need to be in the spotlight more than we typically are. And I've talked about meetings already and promotion, but really you need to communicate to influence. Every time you communicate, you need to think about it as an opportunity to influence. Influence a department to follow the process. Influence a department to approve something you want to do. Influence the CFO, the CEO, the CTO, all of those folks to do something that you need. You also want to visit the decision makers, which I call mabwa, managing up by walking around. You know where they sit. I have facility managers who say, I can't get a meeting with them. They're too busy. They don't want to meet me. I'm just the facility manager. Well, you know where they sit. In the morning, go for a visit. Poke your head in. Again, we come back to time, which you need. And promote, promote, promote every time in your emails, in your talking points, at meetings. Think about how you communicate and think about influencing, not just conveying information. And of course, you really need to embrace the brick wall. And what I mean by the brick wall is that other people in your corporation don't understand what you do. You may report to a department or a boss who does not understand facility management. They may not care that much. As long as the heat is on, then the toilets are clean. You need to educate your boss, educate your HR department, and educate decision makers. We also need to give great customer service. That's a given. So you need to deliver. Not only do you need to deliver, but you need to make sure they know it. This goes back to promotion. So you measure your statistics, response time, completion rates, track and identify problems you solve, and use that statistic. You really need to stop being the police. I started my career as a space planner. I'm the one who would say, no, you cannot have an enclosed office. Your position is entitled to a cubicle. Or no, you cannot have extra space for this or that. We have rules. So again, I've learned my lesson. I would never do that again. So instead, don't be the police. And as this graphic shows, say no nicely, give them options, and help them find alternatives. So if you have a process in place, it's, I'd love to give you an enclosed office. Here's the form you fill out. Send it to the CFO, and if they approve it, I'll build it. So you are no longer the roadblock, but you need to put mechanisms in place to ensure that somebody else has the options and they can choose whether that option is a good one or not. So you need to support everybody. That's your role. You're at the bottom. If you see at the very bottom, your facility department, and of course you're right at the peak at the bottom, managing your department. And you go up across everybody into external customers. Your support, you have suppliers and contractors, you have other internal services, business functions, and then external customers. We need to think about our service in this way and managing it this way. You're just at the very peak at the bottom, but you have a huge influence all the way to the top. So a part of how we do that to be more successful is manage internally. And this is a key thing that many facility managers do not think about. You have to compete internally. When you go bring a business case to your senior management asking for something, you're actually competing against other departments. Those other departments might be better at justifying, at creating business cases, at selling than you are. So they're going to get the money, the people, the resources, the support. So you need to start looking at everything you do as a competition internally so that you can get what you need to do your job the most effective way possible. Now, in order to do that, you need to understand how decisions are made. You have to have metrics, facts, and figures, and create compelling justifications. Go back to what we talked about before, about selling and communicating to influence. You really need to talk their language. There's money, there's time, and there's risk. 3 things are illustrated in this slide. All of them definitely come back to money. But depending on who you're talking to and how you're dealing with things, you need to figure out on how to position it. I used to use money more often. Now I'm tending to use risk as one of the largest and more compelling arguments in some cases. You will have to figure that out internally and how it plays in your organization. So earlier on in my career, and probably even to the mid-career, I kept hearing people say, you need to be at the boardroom table. Facility management needs to be at the boardroom table. We have to have a seat. Lots of seminars, even at IFMA conferences, would say this. The reality is you don't need to be there. And in fact, for many of us, we will never be there. But you need to influence someone who is. Just like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, you always know someone who knows someone who knows the influencers. That's where you need to spend your time. It's not the president, it's the president's administrator. It's not the CFO, it's the accountant or the vice president or somebody. You need to figure that out, and you need to start to manage those relationships so you can influence the top level. So now let's talk about the path to the top as an individual. Well, number one, you need to be more strategic. Many of you can and will if you can get yourself off the treadmill. And again, coming back to the treadmill and time, those are your biggest problems. And then you need to know value. Part of what we talked about is the value of you in facility management, delivering to your organization. You need to know that, be able to communicate it, and use it. You also need to know value as your company sees it, so you can communicate effectively. You also need to stand out. Instead of being in the background, because facility managers should be in the background, because if everything works, they don't need to see you. That's the wrong way. You need to stand out. How do you do that? You communicate, you talk, you sell, you have your mission and vision statement. All the things that we spoke about will help you stand out. It will help your career, and it will help your organization recognize the value of facility management as a profession. The other thing is get non-facility management training. We're often focusing on things in facility management. But you should start to think about business-related skills, marketing, selling, finance, those kinds of things, logistics. Your organization may actually have that kind of training available to employees, but you just haven't looked to taking advantage of them because you think they're for a different department. So the other thing is, don't take no for an answer. Instead of just accepting that you can't get resources, accepting that your budget's going to be cut by 3%, you need to fight back. You need to influence internally. You need to compete. All the things that we talked about, that's what you need to do. So for much of this, you actually need to have a lot of courage. Courage to be upfront, courage for your failings and your mistakes and problems to be seen. Courage to speak out about things that you cannot do as a professional, for instance, cutting some key preventive maintenance routines in order to save money, or legislative things that you know you need to do. This is easy for people to say, it's very hard to do. And of course, it's very important not to be in the background, as we talked about before. You need to get out front. People need to see you. They need to hear about your success. They need to also hear about the failures and how you dealt with them and saved the day. And they need to recognize your contribution. You do that with facts, figures, and communications, the things that we talked about. And basically, ultimately get them to acknowledge your profession. That's facility management, just like the accountants and architects and lawyers and engineers. Now, you want to climb the ladder, and that's one of the ways you do it. for your career and our profession, we need to look to climbing. Now, climbing isn't necessarily an advanced position within your organization. You may already be the highest you can be as a facility manager. But it does mean getting that additional recognition for yourself and your departments, and maybe even making that leap from a smaller organization to a bigger one. So one of the, coming to the very quickly to the conclusion, I'm going to challenge you to do things differently. We talked about a lot of different things that you can do to promote yourself and your department, and to help your department through that promotion get the resources you need to have the amount of people you need to do a good job, to have the systems like CMMS, CAFM, whatever software you need, to have the funds to do the best possible job, to do a quality job, to reduce potential of failure, and all of those things. So this is an example that I always give about doing things differently. And this comes from my experience outside of facilities when I was running for student council in college. We were given a poster. This is back in the day of vinyl lettering and photocopying, no computers. Giving a poster to 11 by 17 to make our sign for, vote for Michel Theriault. And my last name is somewhat long, and so what I decided to do was shift it to the diagonal and have my last name go from corner to corner, so it was as big as possible. And also, very obvious when people walked through a corridor, students, and saw this poster on an angle. I won my position as student council, even though the only thing I did was put up posters, and I won only because I did something differently. And that's the lesson that I've learned ever since, and hope to share with you. And ultimately, by doing so, we can fulfill your destiny and the destiny of our profession, because the more resources you get and attention and respect you get, the more you're going to be able to accomplish. And that is what facility management is all about. So that is the end of the actual slide presentation. And now we can open it up for Q&A.
Great, thank you, Michel. A very good presentation. We do have some questions waiting for you. Receiving useful feedback from the staff and contractors concerning current objectives and goals is important in FM. What approaches can you recommend to obtain mostly valuable information and at the same time furnish helpful information and convey support to staff and contractors?
Well, that's actually a really important one, because if everybody on your team, including contractors and the employees and contractors, don't understand what the goals and objectives are, then it's hard to actually get the best possible result. So, and this is a common problem where you have to go, and this is why you need to sell, and you need to manage up by walking around, and that is go to senior management with specific questions about what facilities is and how it impacts them and what they need for them to be successful. That's how you get the answers you want that you can pass along to your staff and your contractors. And the key here is asking specific questions, because if you go to somebody and say, what are your goals and objectives, you're going to either get something really general or they're not going to know what to say. So you want to really focus it on what you do and ask specifically. Less of an open-ended question.
Great, thank you. I just want to remind everyone attending, if you do have a question, please feel free and type them into the question box. It says, delegation becomes a skillful balancing act if you have built your business on your personal brand. Would you agree?
I would disagree. In fact, your brand and your success isn't what you do. It's what you accomplish. And often, even very successful people accomplish things through other people. In fact, your skill as a manager, and facility management has management in the title, and as a leader, is in getting the resources to align properly and accomplish what you want. So it's not about what you do, it's about you making it happen. That's why I mentioned in the very beginning that one of the key mistakes I made was I was trying to do too much. In fact, do things myself and not figuring out how to do it in a better way through others with a contractor. Eventually, towards the end of the my facility management roles, I'd be the first one to say, this person on my staff actually did this work and they did a great job. This contractor did a good job. I was the enabler, and that's what my role was, and that was my brand. More than just the doing, but the accomplishing.
Great, thank you. Those are all the questions we have at the moment. Michel's information is on the screen, so if you do have any questions that come to mind later, feel free to reach out to him. His email is on there. The next slide, please, Michel.
Oh, yes, indeed.
There we go. The FMCC does do an annual scholarship in honor of Kit Tuvison. So I would encourage you to look at the qualifications and submit, or if you know someone that would qualify, let them know. You can get the information at fmcc-workplace.com or fmcc.ifma.org. And again, FMCC is always looking for STAG volunteers. If you have any desire to serve, we would be thrilled to hear from you. The best person to contact is Gay Tuttle, the STAG chair, and you can reach her directly at gaytuttle.cfm@gmail.com. That's gaytuttle.cfm@gmail.com. And trust me, they would love to hear from you.
Yes. And keep in mind, when we say stag, we do not mean a stag party. This is
Michel, that's how we're trying to bring them in.
Oh, I see. Yes, yes. This is the committee.
Yes, it is. It's the basically kind of like the education committee is what it is. And here's just some hashtag World FM Day on Twitter chats and a Periscope that's going on, etc. Next slide. And we just want to let you know of the remaining webinars out there for you. Session 15 has been canceled. I just want to let you know that that one is not going on. But I would love to see you at session 14 with some fairly well-known IFMA members, Mark Sakula, Tina Schaus, Peter Stroop, Darlene France, and Rich Finelli. And also, Bill Connolly and Chris Leak will be presenting later today about the Knowledge Library. We would love to have you attend that as well. Next slide. I think there's a couple more presentations after that one as well that we'd like you to attend. And you can also see any of the events at fmcc.ifma.org under the Events tab. And as always, the FMCC does like to let everyone know of the other councils that are out there that they can serve as a resource for you. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. Again, I want to thank you, Michel, for a great presentation. And I want to thank everyone for attending, and have a great World FM Day.
Thank you very much, everybody.